Mr. Turner, do you believe the FCC is on strong legal ground with this order and that it will be upheld in the courts?
I believe they took an unnecessary risk by going down the Title I route.
So you do not believe they're on strong legal ground?
I think they are on less firm legal ground than they could have been.
You oppose the resolution disapproval not because you like the FCC order, you've stated that, but because you think the FCC might lose in court. And when that happens, won't you push for reclassification on Title II? Isn't that your preference?
I oppose the resolution of disapproval because of the consequences of once Congress disapproves of these rules, the FCC is then forbidden from enacting any similar rules in that space that could extend to things far beyond network neutrality, to bill shock, lots of other issues.
But the real issue is that they can't do Title II, right, with this disapproval resolution if it becomes law.
No, I don't believe that. I believe the issue of reclassification is separate from the resolution disapproval, and I do not think reclassification would actually fall under the CRA.
Because in your own documents from Free Press, point number 5, legal footing, it says Janikowski reportedly is grounding these new rules in the same kind of legal arguments that were rejected by the courts last spring. This strategy presents an unnecessary risk in a short-sighted attempt to avoid reclassifying broadband under Title II of the Communications Act. Such a move doesn't just put net neutrality on shaky ground. It places the FCC's entire broadband agenda in jeopardy.
That's exactly right.
So essentially, a vote against this resolution is a vote for reclassification, something that more than 300 members of Congress have opposed in a bipartisan basis. Mr. DeReghi, is it your sense that the larger broadband providers cut a deal that they could live with because it was better than Title II reclassification, but that ultimately you'll be the one having to pay the price, companies like yours? Can you turn on your microphone, sir?
That's correct. The smaller providers and the more competitive providers are the ones that will pay the price for the rules. I agree. I would say that all of us could probably live with the rules if we had to, if they stayed there. The question is they don't necessarily stay there, and the rules don't really give all the protections that are needed for the access providers. Content providers are not the only person on the table to protect here.
And does it give you any concern that the FCC refuses to close its Title II rulemaking? They have that still open. They're taking information on. Isn't that kind of like a little club hanging out there?
I think this is really an issue that needs to be solved by Congress. So I think the same thing applies to Title II. The Congress should stop that if that were to happen and pass laws that are through the right process.
I would concur. Some of us in this committee believe they don't have the authority of the FCC. It's not been granted by this Congress or any other Congress. Ms. Kovacs, you explained in your statement that networks have a voracious and unending need for capital. Will the net neutrality order hurt the market for capital for network providers? And be sure to turn on your microphone there, ma'am.
Yes, I think that this rule, if it is implemented at all the way it appears likely, is going to be detrimental because it's going to hit at the revenue sources. It's going to make it easier to cannibalize the network providers' revenues. For example, Skype taking Frontier's voice revenues, driving up the cost of broadband by forcing all of the cost on that. So short version, yes, I think it is going to be a problem.
For capital.
For capital.
Ms. Chase, again, thank you for coming, and I would just suggest to the members, too, that she does have to leave sometime this afternoon to catch a flight back, so you may have to depart before we're done with our questions. But despite the fact that these rules have never existed previously, and the companies that you've been involved with and thousands of others have thrived, do I understand correctly that you support these rules because you believe they're needed to ensure that small companies can compete on the Internet?
These rules haven't existed. If we think about Internet and Internet innovation, it doesn't have a very long life. So indeed, the power of the telcos is becoming more and more obvious. And yes, I think it does need protection. And while I didn't have to need that protection when I found it, today we definitely do.
And you've said that without these rules, small companies will get squeezed out by larger companies that can pay for priority on the Internet, in effect.
It's
correct?
priority. It's also classifying what constitutes the Internet, and if we don't have a definition at the FCC, the telecommunications companies can decide what access actually looks like. So I think I could be separated from my market as well.
And the FCC order itself has said this is not going on today. But, Ms. Chase, you're worried that that might go on in the future, right?
We typically try to protect small interests from duopolies, and I see this as a duopoly, and so it definitely needs some oversight.
So would you be worried if web companies like Google charge websites for prioritized placement on the Internet?
I think the FCC ruling doesn't deal with Google right at this moment. I think it's more talking about infrastructure and access to the Internet.
But would you be worried about that? Are
If
you
it
concerned
becomes-
about that? Because somewhere on the end of the pipe, somebody's prioritizing, right?
Yes, I could become worried about that.
And in preparation for this hearing, I did a little search on car share with Google to familiarize myself with the market. And I was pretty surprised to find that my search resulted in a paid placement at the very top of the search list for Zipcar, the company that you founded and ran. So isn't that exactly the kind of issue you're concerned about in terms of a market leader paying an Internet giant for better access to consumers?
I would say exact opposite. If we think about the old days of newspapers where I, as a rich person, could buy a giant full-page ad on a newspaper and small companies could never afford that, I think that is the parallel that I'd like to draw.
My time's expired, and I will give it to Mrs. Eshoo now.